Okay, this is going to be a lesson on digital signal processing, delays, and more delays. These are things you can do to sweeten the sound of your song or add some artistic effects. We'll start with echo. Echo is created by taking a portion of the signal and then feeding it back onto itself. So an echo is a repeat of the sound. Echo, 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 as you can see in the diagram there. You can vary the amount of feedback, so each echo can be the same volume as the one before, or it can get softer each time. You can delay the amount of space between each echo as well. Different plugins have different ways of doing that, and it's a really cool effect for a lot of songs, music, and sound effects. Reverb is a really important plug-in and thing to have, especially when you don't have the ultimate perfect room to record in. There are three components of reverb: the direct signal, which is the signal from the original source, which would be a singer or instruments usually, or if you're creating a sound effect, whatever that is. Early reflections are the first reflections from the room. It gives you the room size, and those, so you can you should be able to hear if the room sounds small or big. And then the reverberation is the random reflections going from the boundaries in the room. Those are called the decay in the plugin. So direct signal, reflections, and decay. It's important to understand about the room, and how do you know what type of room to pick? It depends what you're recording. So if you're recording a vocal that you want to sound like it's in a hall or a room, you can pick that. What that changes then is going back, it changes the numbers on these three things: the reflections, especially the size of the room, and the amount of random reflections in the decay. So this is a plugin from Pro Tools, and the important things in this plugin are the type of room, the decay here, and the amount of reverb, wet or dry. Wet is always too much reverb. It makes things washed out, and you should be turning that down below usually 20% on your tracks to add the right amount of reverb. These other things here, the pre-delay it also affects the size of the room and the way the sound would be coming from the source. And the high frequency cut filter, if there are high frequencies in there that you don't like the sound of, you can take those out. The low pass filter would allow those frequencies to pass through that filter. You can turn that on or off. And the amount of diffusion of the signal. So we'll look at those and listen to those. It'll make more sense in a few minutes. Another plugin is delays, and this is a digital delay from Pro Tools First. What I think of delays is like thickening the sound. I use them a lot on vocals, strings, things like that. It's not quite an echo, but it's repeats of an input signal, and it sounds more like coursing. So that's why it's used mostly on guitars and vocals, and it's also used in live sound reinforcement to align the sound coming from a speaker versus what you're seeing on stage. So as I said before, they're not quite echoes, but as you get a longer delay, it becomes a discrete echo. And here's some numbers to work with. 15 to 35 milliseconds creates a doubling effect. Under 15 creates a combing effect, which sounds like coursing or thickening of the sound. And then you can get phasing if you have a short-term delay and you have a constant shifting. It sounds like phasing or flanging, and we'll look at that in a minute too. If you combine two identical signals and slightly delay and detune one of them, you get coursing. For those of you who play guitar, you're familiar with that from guitar amplifiers. So these are the right and left delays and the rate of modulation, and that you can adjust, and plus the wet or dry signal from that delay. Pitch and time. A lot of times you might want to transpose music. I do that a lot in terms of practicing for a live performance where we might be doing a song in a different key. I do it a lot when I edit music for a live show that they might need background music in a different key. and I use a program called Amazing Slowdowner, ASD. I'm going to demonstrate that as well, how to change the pitch and speed of a song. There are plugins within programs, but I tend to do this offline on a separate program. It just works really well. A couple more, time compression and expansion. You can change the length of the audio by raising or lowering the playback sample rate. Sample rate usually being, you set that when you open your Pro Tools or whatever software that you're using. When you change the sample rate, it alters the playback samples and changes the pitch. Sometimes I notice that students will open a program and not pay attention to the sample rate, and then drag some audio in there and change the sample rate, and it'll sound very slow. That's an example of doing that by accident. So there's 3 variations. You can change the length of the audio waveform, and you can maintain the pitch, making the audio slower but the same pitch. You can keep the same length and alter the pitch, or you can change the pitch and length. And again, I'll do that in Amazing Slowdowner in a minute. So there are a lot of plugins. There are a lot of plugin packages, and it's one of the fun things in audio to find your favorites out there that people use and acquire some stuff to make great sound. So let's look at some examples of this. I have a reverb that I already put on this project, and I'm soloing the vocals. So let's look at how this sounds. So if I want a big giant sound, I can go to a church and add some decay in there, add some pre-delay, and we'll get this. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. And when I go in here, I'm going to hit Command-click mod delay, so that's not happening, and just make sure I got the reverb on. There we go. That's what I want to hear. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. So that's way too much reverb, so what I'm going to do is turn down the wet dry. I'm going to pick a hall and listen to that now. Maybe turn down the decay a bit too. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. The other thing I like to do is hit stop at the end of the reverb, and you can kind of hear the decay tail. And then you know if you got too much or too little. Listen to that. So you can hear that 2.9 second delay. That's the best way to listen to it. So there's also this gain stage. So when you add reverb, it usually decreases the volume, and you may need to gain it back up. And that's why that is there. Look at it. There's also factory defaults usually in these plugins, so you can start with those. For example, let's look at a medium hall and see what that sounds like to start, and then adjust it. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. And you're just the way that. So to me that sounds like a little bit too much decay. Let me lower that and try it again. Oh, your petals. Alright, I like that one. Now let's look at, I'm going to go ahead and bypass the reverb and turn on the delay. It's a similar thing. This delay is a mono delay. Actually, I could add a stereo delay, but let's start with the mono. I have it on phasing, and actually let's start with just delays. Start with a medium delay and see what that sounds like. Growing free. Oh, your petals, they look good to me. And you're just the way that you should be. Yet you're beautiful naturally. Beautiful naturally. Yeah. as I decreased the time and the delay, it started to sound like an echo, which what we talked about is as when you increase over 30 milliseconds, it becomes an echo, which I did here. If I bring that back down, it becomes more of a thickening sound. Free. Oh, let's go back to starting with the default so I can get back there. There we go. Respect, disrespect, popping bells and posting pics. So you can see there's a big change in this depending on the milliseconds. That's the biggest thing in this plugin right here. You can do a lot with these. You can do flanging, which changes the pitch as well. Disrespect, popping bells and posting pics, stressing on the wasting hips. My body's right, the world is sick, world is sick, world is sick. Well, sounds like it's changing the pitch. That's more used on guitars. It sounds like a spaceship on the vocals. But that's the flanger, and phase shifter, also used on guitars a lot. Respect, disrespect, popping bells and posting pics, stressing on the wasting hips. My body's right, the world is sick, world is sick, world is sick. So you can hear the phase shifting really well on that example right there. So that's the delay, and sometimes programs come with a separate echo and a separate delay. There's also stereo delays. You could, let's change that to stereo delay, which will give you right and left channels discretely. Here, there's a left delay and the right delay, and then the rate in the middle. So if you need to adjust the right and left independently, you can do it with a stereo plugin as well. So that's a little bit about plugins. Again, it's one of my favorite suites of plugins is iZotope, I-Z-O-T-O-P-E, which has a lot of the mastering plugins. It's very common in the industry, and makes your workflow pretty easy as far as doing master tracks and doing your compression and limiting on the masters. I like to deal with changing pitch and time in the song is offline and then bring the track back in. I use Amazing Slow Downer for that by Roni Music, R-O-N-I. And it's very simple. You drag the sound clip in there and then you can change the pitch or the time of the song. So I'll demonstrate that quickly.
One world, one people, Africa to Uganda.
That's changing the pitch, and it goes by semitones. You can actually pick an exact key to change it to, and the time sounds like this.
One world, one people, Africa to Uganda. You hear a voice calling in the jungle. You feel the winds blowing.
So you can change the pitch and time. You can change either, or you can change both. It's really great. You can also change the EQ of the song. Add some lows or highs in or take those out. Usually I use that if there's an issue in a song or I'm trying to hide a word or something like that. So that's Amazing Slow Downer for pitch and time. And then you just file export, and you can export your audio and then put it back into your project that you're working on.